All right, Steve, there's been a lot of speculation with regards to why you've resigned. First of all, let's just cut to the chase. Was it really possibly an amicable separation? That hardly ever happens anymore. Listening to you and Van Harden, your last day on the air, it sounded pretty amicable.
Well, Van and I have always been close, and I think that played out for the public to hear when he was on the show on Friday, our very last program. But yeah, I mean, typically in radio, when a host comes in and says, I'm giving my notice, and this is true in most places in corporate America nowadays, John. I mean, when you give notice, they're like, hey, thanks for the time. We got to shut it down and protect now the future of our product, and we'll pack up your desk for you, send your things on to you, and enjoy the rest of your life. So I anticipated that there was a possibility, despite how good the relationship's been between me and Van over the last few years, and how good management has been to me over the last few years. I anticipated that that would probably be the case, given the high-profile nature of the job I did for them. So I think it speaks really well to two things. First and foremost, to just the kind of operation WHO has, and that it's just unique in this industry. In the end, we have to sell ads. We have to see. I'm still referring to it as we. We have to, make people listen. But at HO, there really is an interest in the legacy, and people really are interested in that. And that is, it's not the main function because you have to make money. I mean, this is at least until Obama's done, a free market. But the second interest, and a real close second, is protecting the legacy of WHO. So I think that really speaks to how serious the people that are in charge of that right now take that on a local level and the way they do business. And secondly, I think it does speak, if I could, for sake of sounding, really self-congratulatory, I think it does speak, John, to the trust that I did earn with the management there, especially when you look at the really unprecedented maneuver of then having me go back on the air after I had resigned for a full 2 weeks. I even said to our general manager, Joel McRae, are you sure you're okay with that? And he said, listen, we know you would never do anything to purposefully harm the radio station, so we absolutely trust you to do that. And that just doesn't happen very often. I've seen two things in radio that almost never happen. One, early in my career, I got fired in the middle of a show and then put back on the air to finish the show. And then two, I quit a job and then was put back on the air for 2 weeks to finish the job. And then to allow me the send-off that they did on Friday. I mean, it's a special place. And I think we had a special relationship with them and with the audience, and I think that played out on Friday. And I hope, you can never quell gutless anonymous blogger nation and the schmucks and the cowards and the manginas that hide out in their comment sections. But the truth of the matter is there is no grand conspiracy. This isn't the Grand Illusion. It's not a Styx album. It is what it is. It's just as simple as I have opportunities to move on and do other things, and they wanted me to stay, but totally understood why I made the decision I made. There's just nothing else to it.
Circle back around to that mangina. No, let's not. Some have said, who in their right mind, and you've been accused of having a right mind sometimes, and your detractors would say you're out of your mind, but
or my mind's too right, one or the other.
That was the first reference I had.
Yes.
Who leaves WHO, and who in the heck hopes to leave WHO and do something more rewarding career-wise?
Well, if you grew up in this state, and if you lived in this state all your life, and if you wanted to be in broadcasting in this state, then the job I had, particularly in afternoon drive, which is really the prime time in news talk radio, I mean, this was, this is like 7 o'clock Central Time, Thursday nights on NBC when we were growing up, and it was Cheers and it was Friends. I mean, those were the kinds of shows that were on at that time period. Seinfeld. I mean, this is prime time in the state of Iowa. And although I know that my wife and I made the right decision, I haven't regretted it at all. I've slept like a Calvinist at night ever since we went down this road originally. Please do not mistake the confidence that we're doing what we really think God has called us to do with the fact that this was an easy decision. Because even though it was the right one, it was not easy. It's not an easy place to leave. You're right. Very few people in their right mind ever leave this place. Most people leave it involuntarily if they leave it at all. Van Harden said to me last week, he said, Steve, I'm trying to think of who's left WHO and gone on to bigger and better things, and I can't come up with anybody other than Ronald Reagan. And I said to him, well, brother, that's because no one ever wants to leave this place. I mean, it offers a level of stability that is unique in this industry. And it would have been very easy for me at 37 years old to settle down and do this for another 20 to 25 years. And Van even told me, hey, I want you to work here the rest of your life, Steve, if that's what you really want. It is a great place to work, but I'm 37 years old, and I'm not ready to settle down yet. I'm just not. This is the analogy I gave to Van, and he used it in the email he sent to the staff. And John Boy needs to go across Walton's Mountain. There's a lot of lights over there. You can see some bright lights over on the other side of the mountain, and I got to go across. I got to scale the mountain. I want to see what's over there. And in the end, I may end up coming back and wanting to do this here for the rest of my adult life. But I know this, at my age, if I don't do this now when I'm financially in a position where it's not that big of a risk to me to give it a try, then I'll spend the next 10 to 15 years of my life regretting that I never gave it a shot. And I think a lot of guys, regardless of whether or not you agree with my belief system, if you pee standing up like I do, I think you probably understand what I'm talking about.
You talked about John Boying the lights, and there was also dead lights too in the movie book It. But we'll table that for a different time. What about the folks that just insist and believe that this couldn't have possibly been amicable? It's been somewhat staged to appear amicable because maybe one party has pictures of barnyard animals with the other. I mean, what about the folks that want to say, well, that show that he did a couple weeks ago regarding Steve Scheffler, the treacherous labeled podcast, that had to be the last straw, or Deace's enemies finally got him out. What about that stuff?
I think if you go to whoradio.com, John, you'll see that all of my podcasts are still on their website, including the one labeled treacherous. I can't think of a time in the last couple of years where I was ever called on the carpet or pressured for what I had said on the air. And they just never babysit me regarding my content. I know, again, that may be hard for people to believe, but that's because they don't understand radio. See, a lot of people think that this really is about a political agenda or a moral agenda. Listen, I'm about a political and a moral agenda. I mean, I was pretty upfront about that. Fear God, tell the truth, and then make money was number 3. But for those that run the radio station, they don't really give a rip about any of that stuff. Really, it's about performance. And what we're here to do in radio is to attract listeners. And as my management told me on my way out the door, my performance in that regard was sky high. That's exactly what I was told. You even heard Van refer to that on Friday. We had a massive audience to this radio program, and WHO in general has a very large audience in the state of Iowa. So because we could attract an audience, really to them, the agenda of the host, provided it doesn't violate FCC standards or break the law, really that's a secondary concern to them. I think people mistake the fact that they supported me as a broadcaster with agreeance with what I'm saying. Those, at times, are two totally different things. Now, Van and I have very similar belief systems, but I also know that he always didn't agree with what I said and what I did, and we'd even talk about those things. But never in the vein of, well, you need to change your mind, but always in the vein of just two people that, coexist and are friends and live in Iowa and are talking about the events of the day. I mean, the agenda for WHO is to attract listeners and to do it in a way that doesn't draw the ire of the FCC or the local authorities. And we did that. And we did that very well. And regardless of whether or not they agreed with me, they supported me because I gave them the performance. I delivered the performance they were looking for. I watched on KCCI the other night, I watched State Senator Matt McCoy, who's now gone from living a lie to spouting them. I mean, the idea that we were losing revenue and all these things just simply aren't true. I mean, do you think with the way I do my radio program and how incendiary at times my opinions are, that if there was not a financial benefit to keeping me on the air, that they would have done so? WHO isn't a subsidy like, the ones that Matt McCoy and many of his Democrat buddies hand out of our own pocketbooks, a lot of at the State House. WHO is like the NFL, as Jerry Glanville once said, which is not for long, which is how long you last if you don't make any money.
Who's it owned by the way?
Bain Capital. Thank you very much for making a reference of that, which is the company, the venture capital company founded by Mitt Romney. I've been working for the last 2.5 years. I've been working for people who have a vested interest in Mitt Romney's success, or in the very least, even though he's divested from that company, he helped make those people that are still there a lot of money.
Are you on great terms with Mitt?
Not on great terms with Mitt, as many would know. Willard and I, didn't send each other any Christmas cards, but the reality is that Bain Capital, we know what they're looking at. They're looking at the bottom line. And the bottom line was we had a lot of listeners and everybody made a lot of money. That's the bottom line. And WHO really had no other agenda other than that. Me, I did have an agenda other than that, but I also had to meet their standard. And if I don't meet their standard, which is a lot of listeners and a lot of money, I don't get a lot of time to talk.
Steve, first of all, the Friday show he refers to is February 11th, 2011, his last program on News Radio 1040 WHO in Des Moines, Iowa. The van he refers to is Van Harden, the Marconi award-winning program director for the venerable News Radio 1040 WHO. Last thing in this segment before we go forward, the last segment that you did, very emotional.
Yeah.
Some people emailed me saying, "Hey, that is Deace a good actor?" I've never heard him have those level of emotions, show that level of sincerity. Was that real?
It was, and you know what? I tried to avoid that. I went in about a half hour before the show began live and recorded that last segment. I didn't script my final comments. I knew what I wanted to read from in the scriptures, but I didn't script those comments that were before or after them, nor the emotion. I actually was trying to avoid that. Earlier in the day when I had sent a goodbye email to the staff, I had a lot of tears, which really surprised me. And I think it probably snuck up on me, the special place I was leaving, and just how really touching a lot of the emails I received from the audience, and really softened me up before I went in and taped that segment. And I taped it to avoid that kind of emotion, and I couldn't even avoid it while taping it. And I had thought about, I'm going to scrub it and do it clean. But then I thought, no. All along on Deace in the Afternoon, whether it was sports or news talk, we've always kept it real. And that was for real. And, this was at times more than a radio program. And I think when you saw the way that the audience reacted, both pro and con, to my departure, I think that's a testimony to that.
Coming up, we'll look towards the future of Steve Deace and what that may hold.